Hello, can everybody hear me? Just like make a signal that you can. Beautiful. I'm Laura Chapman. I am the organizer for the Putney Huddle, which is a progressive group that was formed shortly after the Women's March. And we just kept doing things and got really interested in town governance and in supporting democratic process. So that's why we do these things, so that everybody can hopefully participate in an educated way. And I'm glad to see so many folks are here. And I just ask that you stay muted unless you are called on. There will be a time to ask questions. Meg is our moderator and she will take it from here. So,
Thank you, Laura Chapman, and thank you, Putney Huddle, for moving democracy forward and giving people more information as they make their decisions. I'm Meg Mott, the town moderator for Putney, and excited that again we have a candidates forum. We were hoping to do it in person, but Mother Nature had something else in mind. And so that could not happen. And the switch to Zoom didn't make any sense since one of our candidates operates a plow and we do not want to keep the plow people occupied with anything besides plowing. So thanks to Laura Chapman's amazing organizational skills, we flipped everything to another day, another time, and so happy that we have two candidates here. These are candidates for the Putney Selectboard. There are two seats that are open. One is a 2-year seat, and we have Bryce Hodson and Nate Snell with us this evening. The other seat is a 3-year seat, and Peg Alden is running unopposed. So before we get going into the questions for our two candidates here this evening, Laura, would you be willing to read Peg's prepared statements? All the candidates were asked 4 questions ahead of time. Tell us a bit about yourself. Why are you running for Putney? What are Putney's challenges? And what do you see as Putney's strengths? So Peg has answered those ahead of time, and Laura will now read. Thank you.
thanks. So this is from Peg. Greetings, Putney neighbors. Peg Alden here. I am one of the 2 select board members that was voted in last spring when our select board expanded from 3 to 5. My seat was only for 1 year, so I'm running again now for a 3-year seat. I'm sorry that my schedule doesn't allow me to participate in person today, but I'm appreciative that you get the chance to hear Nate and Bryce share their thoughts about joining the select board. Thanks to both of you for stepping up. I know many of you from the 40 years that I have called Putney home and the 20+ years that I've worked at Landmark College. But one of the greatest gifts of serving on the select board this last year has been coming to know new layers of our Putney community. For a small Vermont town, we are a wonderfully complex web of connections. The main reason that I'm running for select board again is because I love this town and I deeply respect the folks that are working as volunteers and employees to keep our town thriving. Municipal government is at the heart of our democracy, and although the process can sometimes be murky and mucky, I feel a sense of obligation to pitch in where I can be helpful. And after a year of on-the-job select board training, I'm looking forward to increasing my helpfulness in service to this town. Like all towns, Putney has many challenges, but to me, one of the biggest is finding ways to bridge the divide between town hall, town with a big T, and the community, town with a small t. Whether it's in our future Putney gatherings or the town planning process, I keep hearing the themes of connection and communication. As a select board member, one of the priorities for me over the next year will be to work with others to find ways to communicate more clearly what's happening at town hall and to invite and facilitate more connection. If you have suggestions, please reach out to me. There are so many important projects underway in our town right now. Groups have developed to work on revitalizing the downtown, improving and expanding housing options, and envisioning a new community center. We have a town planning commission that is inviting us to help rewrite our town plan to best reflect our community goals and values. And we have other town committees and commissions where you can plug into projects that interest you. Of course, our town needs you to show up to vote and participate in town meeting, but I encourage you to look for other ways to show up for Putney. It's work, but it's also rewarding connections. Please join us. And that was from Peg Alden, who could not be here.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura. So let's turn to our two candidates who are here, and we'll take that first question of, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And we'll be able to ask you a follow-up question is, why are you running for the select board? And I thought I'd go in alphabetical order for the first question and then reverse it for the second. So Bryce, what do you want us to know about who you are? And you may need to unmute yourself.
All right. There we go. I'm Bryce Hodson, and I've lived in Putney / on our family property. I actually, our property is split by two towns. So I grew up in Westminster, even though Putney was our main kind of town that we gathered in. And so I've been here for 49 years, but also done lots and lots of traveling and went to school in state, as well as, just traveling around the world. I went to daycare with Eva Mondin 49 years ago. So I have a history with Putney, and I really like it. And I've seen Putney, for the last 5 decades kind of progress, and become what it is. And it's becoming more and more of diverse. And, I really like, that Putney is what it is. So, I guess leading into that, part of why I'm running is to keep.
And you can hold off on that, Bryce,
Okay.
until we'll come to the second question. But that was a
Sure.
great introduction. Thank you very much, Bryce. Nate, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are? And then we'll ask about the select board next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, I'm Nate Snell. I was born and raised here in Putney. I walked to school, to Putney Central School, all 9 years. I went to daycare in Putney, but I worked at the general store under the Putney Historical Society with Betsy McIsaac and Lisa Papazian, and actually became a supervisor and helped transition from the Putney Historical Society over to Mike and Kim Costco's ownership, which I think they've done a wonderful job, especially during COVID, which has been extremely difficult, especially for them. They were here for like 3 months before, they got into the brunt of it. So from there, I went over to work in Brattleboro for a year for actually Antidote Books opened up another business there when they closed down in Putney. Specializing in coffee, and I honed my skills and came back to Putney to offer that at the diner, where I'm helping manage there and helping Marie's business, which is Maple Coffee Company. And I actually had to come back to Putney because 6 months, not even just working in town, just living in town, I felt a little bit disconnected. I was used to seeing a bunch of people that work here, that live here every single week at the general store, 3-4 times. And I missed that connection. So as soon as I came back, I wanted to become more involved, which actually leads into why I'm running.
And so luckily, Nate, you're able to do that lead in because we're going to reverse directions. So yes, take us on the second question. Why are you running?
I'm running because during that time, I wanted to see everyone. I wanted to be more involved in our town and actually what goes on, what may seem like behind the scenes, even though it's available to all of us. So I joined our fire department, our volunteer fire department, and I started, at the diner, like I said. But I also wanted to join the Equity Inclusion Committee, which is actually something that Peg Alden suggested to me, I think last year. And since doing that, I've felt more connected. And with the VCRD process, it felt like a natural lead-in. Since there's a spot open, now I can take my chance.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Bryce, why are you running for select board?
I'm running for select board because I did last time, when Peg was running and a bunch of us were running. And I just really like the process of how our government works and how it runs and how I think we can make kind of a difference. But I'm also running because I have two little kids that are 8 and 10 that are at Putney Central. And so I really want them to have the same kind of experience that I grew up with, kind of knowing everybody in town and having a name and a face, and not being a no-name kind of town. But also trying to help create what our downtown is going to look like. I've been on the VCRD, Vermont Council on Rural Development, trying to help revitalize downtown. And so there are, some important issues. I feel like, being here for almost 50 years, Putney used to be a very big tourist town. And I feel like we've moved a little bit away from that, and we're more of a bed and breakfast community. So I want to try and bring Putney back to more of a community that, that we all feel like, we include or we're all part of. So, because we do have a lot of special places here, and I feel like, the natural resources that Putney has is pretty great. So I just want to make sure that we all have the ability to use it and know about it.
And Bryce, that's a great segue for our third question is in your opinion, what do you think Putney's biggest challenge is? You referenced a little bit about wanting to bring back the tourism industry, if I heard you correctly. And
Sure.
Are there other things that strike you as being challenges that Putney is dealing with?
I think Putney's biggest challenge, right now is the fact that we're a little town that's starting to get big. Especially like on one of the roads that's really close to me, Pine Banks Road. When I first grew up, one of my first memories is that it was only 1 or 2 farms on the entire road. And now there's probably 50 or 60 houses. So, part of that is the planning board and how our zoning is being allowed to, subdivide in such big chunks that, that farm that was there is now 10 houses, So I think that's one of the challenges is that we're adding more people, but we haven't pursued the infrastructure part of our town in terms of, there's no playground downtown. My kids love walking from the school to the general store to get a piece of candy, but then they have nowhere to play. So it's kind of one of those, there's not a lot in downtown for all the little kids, but, by inviting more families to come, I feel like we need to really buckle down and start thinking about, what we want Putney downtown to look like. There's really nowhere for those parents that work for a living to get takeout dinner unless you go to Brattleboro, which is unfortunate because we used to have, a Chinese place and we used to have pizza and, it's a college town. I've never been to a college town that didn't have some kind of takeout pizza or takeout something, for those college kids. And we don't have it. So, there's lots of, little things like that I feel like we need to kind of work on.
Great. Thank you very much. Nate, what crosses your mind when you're thinking what are Putney's challenges?
I actually agree a lot with what Bryce is saying because I think one of our actual biggest challenges is retaining populations such as, the people that I grew up with. There's a very small portion of them still living in town anymore. You go off to college, you have an experience in a larger, town or city, and you try to come back and there's not, housing for you, or if there is, there's not exactly a nightlife or anything else to do here, or that's, that you hear about. Because there are plenty of things that happen in town. And I actually, with the Our Future Putney process that happened, joined the community center board because, and during that actually, we found out that, next stage, there's the actual community center. There's, all of these locations that can be used to host events, that are used to host events, but people don't seem to know about them. So I think that one of our problems is having something to do here. So how to address it is exactly what we've been doing with the Our Future Putney, with the housing, with the revitalizing downtown, with the community center. I think all of those will tie in to a better Putney and how to fix the problems that we have currently.
Great, thank you. Both of our candidates are longtime residents of Putney. They know this town very well. So we're going to flip directions, which means Nate, you'll go first for our final prepared question, hoping to get more questions from our participants. What do you think Putney's greatest strengths are?
Well, actually, that's a really easy question. I think it's the people. I think that we have great turnout. When the general store burned down for the second time, the community rallied and we got a new general store. And I think it's one of the staples that we have here in Putney now. It was before, but I think that with the VCRD, with Our Future Putney, the facilitators, Hannah and Brian, they all said that Putney, they've done this 60 plus times, had amazing turnout with every single meeting. Usually they'll see it taper down. That didn't happen with our community. We showed up. We wanted to vote. We wanted to have our voices heard.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Bryce, what do you think are Putney's greatest strengths?
I agree with Nate. I think our people, my parents came here and were quote unquote, hippies and, the best, at Wyndham College. And, one of the best things was participation, but also the fact that I guess they kind of all, along with the local people who were here for 200 plus years, it all kind of melded together. And so they all have the ability to participate, but also just our natural resources. I live in the woods and there's so many of these older, class 4 roads, which are still public right of ways that are just amazing to walk on, and that's a huge resource that we have. And in my area, Westminster being right next to us, the Westminster has its own town forest with a heron rookery. And that's actually East Putney Brook Road is the original Westminster West Road. So I really enjoy the fact that, I can walk to Westminster West in less time than it takes me to drive there. So, I think the people for sure and the ability to rally, like Nate said, but also just problem solving, people, we have so many not just educated people, but also people who've been here that know the history. And, I'm a big history buff, so I really enjoy listening to all the old stories and, knowing how kind of they did it. And maybe there's solutions there, as to how we can fix things too, one of the nice things was my stepfather told me Town Farm Road was actually set up. It was a farm up there that was set up for, the older and poor people, that the town actually took care of them at the town's expenses. The original old folks home, I guess, so to speak, so maybe that, there's lots of ideas out there. So I think that's, one of the biggest things Putney has is resources, people, and, natural beauty and everything else.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And you're both telling us that there's a sense of appreciation of the history of Putney going back even further than what we may have lived through. So we're now going to turn and open this up to the audience. There's several ways to get my attention for asking questions of either of our candidates. And one is, if you turn on your screen, just wave like this. Or if you don't have your screen on, there's a little device somewhere on your screen. Janice Baldwin is now showing us what it looks like to use the electronic hand up. Janice, please, your first question. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Bryce and Nate, for stepping up to do this. And it's really impressive to hear, your strong connections to Putney. You've both been so immersed in the community, whether for 50 years or I don't know how old you are, Nate, but but as long as you've lived here. I can't say that, unfortunately. However, both of you are so connected to the community in your work. Nate, at the diner and previously at the general store, and seeing people every day. And Bryce, you with your landscaping and the plowing, you really get to know people and to see them. So I'm curious, what one thing have you learned from being that close to people that will inform how you make decisions at the select board? And that's a question for both of you.
Yeah, thank you, Janice. That's such a great question. Really getting into each of your lives and your connections. Why don't we go first with Nate on this one?
Thank you. And thank you, Janice, for your question. I think what would influence is the fact that with my experience over at the general store and with the diner and I think that there is a few different populations in Putney, and it's important to know that, if I go to the co-op, I might see somebody I haven't seen in years if I haven't gone there versus if I spent every day at the general store. So just getting out there and listening. I love walking around town. I do a loop where I walk Sand Hill Road and the sidewalk that we have going in down Kimball Hill. And I get stopped all the time, and I just love having conversations with people. So just taking the time to listen.
Great. Thank you very much. Bryce, what is your answer to Janice's great question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of pride myself in knowing a lot of people in town, being as many years. So I think one of my biggest things is that I run into a lot of people who don't necessarily always participate in our town government, but have a lot to say, like Nate was saying. And so, I've always struggled for the last year or so that I've been running as to how to get people more involved and or how do we find a way that's not expensive to ensure that everybody kind of understands what's happening in town. Because a lot of people come up to me and, being a small town, there's rumor mills, and people are like, oh my God, I heard so-and-so is doing this and the town is doing that. And, but then, they aren't informed and they don't go to the meetings. And so, I think one more, I haven't figured out the solution yet, but trying to figure out a way to ensure and listening to, like Nate said, all those different groups, because there are a lot of groups, that I feel like some of them get ostracized a little bit, I wonder how much, the people at the paper mill really come to the meetings. I haven't seen many who I know live in town, but they also come to me and say, hey, what's going on? Or, hey, we don't want to see this. Why are they doing that? And so, I think that's what I kind of will try to represent is those, people who come to me to talk to me about things that they don't quote unquote actively involve themselves in what's happening. So I think that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, right. This rumor mill. How can our elected officials help us with the rumor mill? I'm looking across the screen to see if there's anybody else who wishes to ask a question. Yep. Heather. Sorry.
Nope.
Heather Small, and then I'll turn it back to you, Bryce.
Yep.
Thanks, Meg. My question for both candidates is kind of regarding the position that they're going to fill is both fiduciary as well as managerial. And I'm wondering what they're bringing to the table that qualifies them for that position.
And Heather, could you say what you said besides managerial skills? What was the other skill you're looking for?
Fiduciary.
Fiduciary. And you want to explain what you mean by that? That would be very helpful.
So fiduciary is in reference to spending town money. You have a money obligation to the taxpayers and to
Mhm.
do in their best interest.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. How are you going to bring in the fiduciary interest, meaning that you're responsible to taxpayers and also engage in good managerial skills of getting things done? So this one, I'll go first with Bryce.
That's a good question. I run my own business, like Janice had said. And so I get the, money, as well as having two little kids that are always asking for money. I end up having to, create chores for them to give them money. But, I think that's one of the biggest topics of the town, from the people I talk to is, people really don't want to pay more taxes. And a lot of the people who've been here for multiple generations can't afford it, and are really concerned that, they're going to get taxed out of town, even though their family has been here for 200 plus years. So I think it's really important um, to look at it, but also, I feel like infrastructure wise, I haven't really talked to Karen too much about it, but I'm wondering, I think putting money in the bank, if we're going to continue to build more infrastructure and add more people, we need to ensure that we're putting money in the bank so that we're not reactionary to taking out a bond every time something breaks, or if we need a new fire truck, why aren't we putting X number of dollars away a year? And we may be doing that, but I know that, on the last town meeting, there was a big deal about buying a new fire truck and buying, new pieces of equipment, which we were, I believe, taking bonds out, but I might be incorrect in saying that. So maybe I should, but I think, being financially responsible, but also, judiciary, listening to everybody and what they have to say, as opposed to going down the road of just listening to one group or the other, that maybe we all fit in, is important as well.
Great. Great. Thank you, Bryce. Nate, what do you have about this? This is a hard question. Thinking about your role as somebody who's responsible to the taxpayers. So money has got to be part of the equation, and also getting things done.
Absolutely. And thank you, Heather. For experience, since I've graduated high school, I've managed basically every business I've worked at. Starting with the general store, I was the only employee at Duchess. I managed the Putney Diner, and with those roles comes, ordering and making sure that you have the money to get those supplies, to stock those shelves, or food. But when it comes to spending and taxes and all of that, I know that there's great resources that I can reference, like VCLT. Like at the moment, I know I am lacking in that field, but I am willing to do the homework.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask around. I'm going to talk to Putney residents. I'm going to attend any class available to me to make sure that I'm doing the best possible job.
Great. And thank you, Nate, for referencing Vermont Cities League of Towns. That is a resource for new select board members to build up their skills in just those ways. Emily, what's your question? And you may need to unmute yourself. Yes. Yay. Oh, I don't know why we see your voice, we see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. And I bet there'll be a way to figure this out if you see something on your screen that allows you to unmute. No, now you're muted. Now does it work? Oh, maybe do you have headphones? This is sad. If you want to put it into chat, Jamie is recommending that as well. Emily, if you continue to have difficulty, you can always put your question into chat and I'll read it from there. As we're waiting for Emily to work out the technical issues, is there anybody else who has a question? Yes, Dawn.
Okay. When I heard both you guys were running, there's some things that I have felt lacking in some of these meetings, and they were much what Bryce was talking about. There are different groups in Putney, and many are not being represented. And I think both of you represent some of those groups, and it's really exciting. And I cannot imagine having to make a choice between you two. My question is there any way you could work together? I mean, share the job or something, because you both have so much to offer that in areas that I see lacking in this town. So
Great question, Dawn, and that you could see how together we have the perfect candidate because of speaking to two different groups. I'll go with Bryce first on this one, and then Nate, and then it looks like Emily may be back on.
Right on. I was gonna say, since I ran last year, I have to say that I'm friends with the majority of the people on the select board and know them very well. And so I even still have been communicating with them. And even if I didn't get elected, I know Nate really well and would definitely come to him with issues or, I'm really good at problem solving. So, I think no matter what happens on Tuesday, that I plan on being, active in the community and definitely coming to, to select board meetings and, planning board meetings and kind of, working with people and saying, hey, listen, my constituents, feel this way or that, to ensure that, things get done, the way we want to, because, as a community, that's who we are. We're not Nate and we're not Bryce or Eric McGowan or, we're all of us. So, we really have to be able to work together. My experience, I went to the School for International Training where my dad was the head of the World Issues Program. And, that's the biggest thing is, being a community in all cultures, and being able to listen to people and, not taking sides, so that's my response to that, I guess.
Thank you, Bryce. Nate, what have you got to say about this issue of each one of you represents a different part of the town, and we need both of you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Don, for your question. Like Bryce said, we're good friends, and I'm sure, you'd feel comfortable coming to me as I would be coming to him. At the very least, we see each other often, we'd be able to talk about the issues. So I don't see one of us completely disregarding the other in any case. I think that we would work together very well, whether one of us is on the board or not.
That you guys are bringing tears to my eyes. I kid you not. I teach politics over at Keene State, and one of the students last week said, could we get different people running for office? It seems to be our problem is who runs for office. They certainly don't have the interests of the people in mind. They're much more interested in knocking each other out. And so I can now just say, well, in Putney, we actually have candidates who are very concerned for the whole. Emily, have we got you here? Yes.
I think so.
Yay!
Do we?
Yes, we can hear you, Emily. Or we could.
Uh-oh.
Are you there? You were there. I wonder if you have to hold down the space bar.
So Emily, you are unmuted, but you just went off video. Oh, she's back in the waiting room. Hold on. Technical errors.
We will get this. And as we're waiting for Emily, I see that Jamie has written in chat to both of our candidates. Seeing you serve on town committees has been powerful. Thank you for that service.
Can I talk now?
Emily, that's so good. Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. I am so sorry. Anyway, maybe you can't see me, but I simply wanted to, first of all, thank both of you, wonderful men, for standing up. And I wanted to ask a question about something that's kind of controversial here with the Wyndham Windsor housing project on the, land right across from the Putney Co-op. It's pretty divisive in some circles. And it doesn't really fall in the normal, progressive conservative spectrum. I'm really interested. It's complex. I'm really interested to hear both of your thoughts. Just, let it go. The other thing I wanted to say, and I appreciate that Bryce brought this up a little bit, are your feelings about protecting natural habitat within the town of Putney and to the extent that we can influence the environment beyond. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm so glad we were able to get on because those feel like two tough questions, especially that first one. I can't remember who I asked to go first last time. It was Bryce, so we're going to go with Nate. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Emily. When I decided to run for select board, I actually knew that the Wyndham Windsor housing thing would be a hot topic. So I asked everyone I could possibly ask about it because I needed to know more. And from what I can gather, even as a member of the select board, that is not something I would be able to touch at this point. That is in the courts. And then the second question was about the environment. And actually, my partner right now is a limnologist. So they study inland bodies of water, that's lakes, rivers, and something that they said was very important to them and also to me, actually. Like I said earlier, I walk Sand Hill Road a lot. They thought that should not be a road for cars to travel on. It doesn't save that much time. And also it's, wetlands that needs to be preserved, in my opinion. It's a beautiful walking path. It's drinking water. It's something that's very important to me and also environmentalists, as far as I understand.
Great, thank you. And Nate, you do bring up an important point of what is the jurisdiction of the select board? What can they address? What can't they? And that seemed to be in Emily's question as well, particularly about environmental issues. Bryce, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, the housing one is difficult for me because I feel like, we do need to add people, but regardless of whether it was Wyndham Windsor housing, I feel like as a small community, we have, under 2,000, registered voters in the town. And I just feel like, adding, 25 more units kind of, I hate to say all of a sudden, but it feels like to me, it's a little bit like that, as opposed to, selectively adding, a house every X number of years just seems a little bit hard. It's a really hot topic because it's, a lot of people feel like we need it and we need more affordable housing. But to me, that also speaks to the fact that, buying a house in this town isn't easy. It's not something that anybody who used to just work a 9-to-5, McDonald's type of job that could buy a house can't do that anymore. And so, sorry about the dog. But so it's hard for me because I think we need it, and there's so many people in Putney that feel like it should be given to Putney residents, and then there are a lot of other people who I've talked to in town who feel like that there should be more than just Wyndham Windsor housing building houses. So, it's tough, but it is in the courts, again. And so, it's something that, I think comes down to the planning board and commission, because they're ultimately the ones who decide, whether we have the resources and, how the zoning is set up to be able to do those type of things. So, I think the select board a lot of times goes along with that. And so, the housing, we're always going to need housing, but, that kind of leads me into the whole protection of natural resources where, we don't want, we're a big property owner in Putney, Westminster area, where we almost have 100 acres. And so would I ever want to see that broken up so that more people could move into town? No, because we enjoy, we enjoy sharing it with our neighbors, and just having the ability for wildlife to have a place is pretty huge, as well as being able to grow food. And like I said, when I lived here growing up as a kid, we had several dairy farms and we have 0 now. Granted, a lot, some of those have become organic vegetable farms, but some have also become housing. So the current trend is to build in downtown areas so that we don't kind of mess up those natural areas out in the hills. But I think ultimately, if a lot of people would want to live in the woods, if possible, as opposed to downtown, which brings up all kinds of issues in terms of infrastructure and policing, and do we have the fire department to provide for those housings? Like, are we ready as Putney? And honestly, I haven't done enough research to know, is Putney ready for X number of developments? Because if we do build this one, and it's for the most part the town has approved it, it's in the courts obviously, but where does the next one go? Because obviously Wyndham Windsor Housing isn't going to completely walk away from Putney. So are we set up as a planning commission / a town, because it really has raised a lot of issues in town, just from people I talk to, as opposed to but those are the people who aren't coming forward as well, so that brings us back around.
Right.
I know.
Right.
Just one quick thing. I just noticed, I know that I wonder if we could in Putney, we don't have like a newsletter, but I know that like the Westminster Gazette, is published by the town of Westminster, and a lot of people get information via that, who don't necessarily use Facebook or have computers. So I know a lot of friends in Westminster who use that as their, kind of town crier, I guess.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Bryce. I see that Janice has her hand up, and I just want to make sure, is there anybody else? Because otherwise I'm very eager to hear what Janice Baldwin's question or comment may be. Seeing no other hands, let's turn it back to Janice. Thank you.
Hey, thank you again. I have both a point of clarification and a question. With regard to Wyndham Windsor, it is no longer in the courts unless they're appealing again. It was published quite recently that the judge gave them the go-ahead, and there is 30 days for an appeal. So that's, I believe, with us. And the second point of clarification is I don't believe the select board has any authority here. It's the DRB who is involved in making the decisions. So the select board doesn't really have a role, as I think Peg has emphasized, in making any decision about this. However, my question wasn't in that regard. I have a question for Bryce. You're clearly so passionate about many issues in this town, and you're stepping up and running again. I'm curious, number one, why you haven't, and if you will, join one of our town committees if you don't become elected. I mean, Nate is already on the equity inclusion. He was on the steering committee for the Putney Your Future, and a few other things. So could you speak to that? Why you haven't joined a town committee? And if you would, if you're not elected? Thanks.
Great. Bryce, would you like to answer that question? Then I do have an update from Laura Chapman about the appeal process. Yeah, Bryce, why didn't you answer?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the reasons why I didn't join a committee, after I didn't get elected last time was just the balancing act and juggling of, being on the VCRD, or God, I always mess that up. Vermont Council on Rural Development.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
VCRD, yeah, right?
Yeah, you're
I have
you're
to write
good.
that down, it's just a juggling act of it was, the middle of the summer is really hard to be to get on a committee, but also like I did actually visit several of those meetings, from different things. Just trying to pick which one was the best one for me, like I'm really in touch with the environmental stuff. But it's hard to say, and I definitely would look again and go to more meetings. Planning would be a big one, but also that's a tough question. Yeah, because I feel like I have been participating, but not necessarily on a board.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
um
Right.
I definitely would be interested though in re-looking at it either way, and getting on a board, for sure.
Great. And it sounds like there's lots of opportunities. We have town committees and the future of Putney and all sorts of ways for people to get involved. Laura Chapman did a little research about the question of the appeal and that it is going to a higher court, so it's still in the court system. And as people are reinforcing, the select board's role may be fairly minimal. However, it sounds like because it is a hot issue and people want to talk to their select board, that's Peg's idea of the capital T town and the small T town, that knowing that our candidates are both eager to hear from people seems important. Nate, I just want to give you a chance. I know that last question was directed at Bryce, but if you have any thoughts or something you want to share at this point before I start asking people in my gentle way if they have any more questions.
No, I thought that was a great question. I do know that even at one of the VCRD meetings, they actually had little postcard basically things of the different committees that are all looking for people, and there had to be at least 8 different ones that are available. So I do know that we're always looking, and that's a great way to get involved at the very least. And that's actually something I want to inspire more of the younger generation, people in my generation, even younger. I'm 24, by the way. I know that came up earlier, but I want to get them more active as well.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm going to make a little plug, if I may, and then I'll turn back that town meeting is happening on Tuesday, and it is going to actually be town meeting and not a public information session, which means that if you are only participating in quotes by watching it on BCTV, you won't be able to vote on anything but these candidates. So showing up for town meeting is how you can have something to say. There's nothing on the warrant here that has anything to do with housing in Putney, but certainly a lot that has to do with general fund expenditures, the highway fund expenditures, buying a new highway truck, and other financial fiduciary interests of the town. So that is happening 10 o'clock Tuesday, Putney Central School. It'll be so nice to see people in person, but you do need to be there if you want to weigh in on those issues. Heather has her hand up again, and then I see that Bryce also does. So Heather first.
Thanks, Meg. For both candidates, you guys seem to have large circles, but how do you reach out to somebody that you don't normally associate with? Like if you're not a customer with a plow guy or a landscape guy, if you don't frequent the diner, how are you reaching out to those people?
Right. Let's see. Bryce, I think you're up first on this question.
Well, I actually, I go to the co-op and or the general store, either with my kids or, after I drop them off at school. So, I for one, being a long resident of this area, have join the kind of coffee talk. Either at the general store or at the Putney Central School when they either drop kids off or pick them up, or just I work in town, so I'm always running into everybody. And so but I make it a point to not run in one specific circle. I make it a point to know everybody on every economic slide, from top to bottom, so that because I also volunteer a lot of, not necessarily via an organization, but when people need help or they can't afford to do something, I'm the first one to jump up and be like, hey, listen, you'll scratch my back because I know where you live. And, when I need help, you're going to come and help me, and so, being a small business owner, that's a lot of times what I do is I know, so many different tradespeople that, need help. And, I personally won't do electricity work. So I have a good friend who's an electrician, and when he needs his driveway plowed, I'll trade him, or, so I'm always running into people, and I'm always willing to talk to people, and you get a lot of information that way, and it's not always exactly correct. So it's the filter system that's the hard part, I think, is it's the hardest part for that, but certainly running into everybody. And I think one of the biggest things Putney has to realize too is that we're not the only ones who use Putney as a downtown. Many people from Westminster West, as well as parts of Dummerston, use Putney as their downtown as well. So I think it's really part of our thinking, to realize that it's not just the Putney residents, even though we're the ones who make decisions about what's happening, So.
Great. Thank you, Bryce. Nate, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's a little bit of what I was saying earlier. Like in these last 4 months that I've been at the diner, there is a whole new population of people that I'm meeting and getting to know. And at the general store, I was there for 4 years. I got to know that population pretty well. Of course, it was during COVID. There was a lot of people that moved here during that time, and I got to know them as new faces. And I get to meet the other ones that I didn't get to know earlier, now at the diner. And like Bryce said, I frequent the co-op. I go to the general store. Even now, I have a great rapport with them. And I still get to run into new people there. Actually, when I was looking to get my petition signed to run for this position, I met somebody new, and they signed my petition, and we got to talking for a good 5-10 minutes. I take walks around town. I get to meet people that way. It's just being open to having conversation and receptive to listening.
Great. Thank you so much. Laura, what do you have on your mind?
Thanks. Everybody has their own process. When I ran for select board, or long before I even ran for select board, when I was thinking about running for select board, I started showing up at meetings regularly. I was kind of doing that before I was even thinking about it, but I started showing up at meetings regularly, really diving into the issues in my own head, and trying to understand the process. I reached out to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and ended up doing some research through them to understand what service was about. And I'd also served on the school board. I'm curious what each of you has done in order to prepare for this role. What has your homework been?
That's a very precise question. It's not like where have you lived for your life. It's more like what kind of homework have you done for being a select board member? We'll start with Nate.
Thank you, Laura. My homework has actually been talking to people that I know have run in the past or current candidates. I had a conversation with Peg. I actually talked to you, Laura, about what resources I could use. And you told me that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has a handbook that I could check on. It's about 230 odd pages that I could look into on how to be a select board member. It's just, I've been reaching out to people, getting to know their points also, and what resources I can use. I don't know what else to say.
Great. Thank you. Bryce, what have you been doing? What's been your homework strategy?
Well, my homework strategy, I guess started, quite a while ago. We own a pretty famous swimming spot. And so I've had to go before both select boards and planning boards in Westminster and in Putney. But to kind of combat it. But also I've been going to a lot of the planning board just because I want to know what's happening with the housing or I don't know if a lot of people know, but we're also making a new town plan, as well as rewriting a lot of our bylaws for zoning. So I think I've been going to those, and as well as I've been going to a bunch of select board meetings when possible. So that's been kind of I've been doing a lot of that recently, but also I've been to a lot of select board meetings, and I kind of get the format of how it works. I think there's going to be a lot of reading. If what I understand is there's a lot of paperwork that you have to go through and be ready, for lots and lots of quote unquote homework.
Right. Great. Thank you very much. Nate, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, Bryce actually reminded me that we attended that meeting. The Planning Commission had a meeting recently last week. We attended that meeting together, and that's actually something that I think helped prepare me for this. But also, I had to learn a new skill. I had to help them facilitate the online group, the online forum that they had for that. And that's something I haven't done in the past, but it's a new skill that I think I can add to my resume.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's great capacity building to know, to run meetings, to be in meetings, to facilitate meetings. Heather, I noticed that your hand is up. I want to make sure, is that a new question?
No, my laziness, my
Oh,
apologies.
no problem. So it looks like we've been going for almost an hour. I don't see any other hands up. I want to say how excited I am that 38 people are on this call. And given the fact that this was going to happen yesterday, and then a big snowstorm came, and Bryce could not do a Zoom call and plow out the roads at the exact same time. So Laura Chapman was able to come up with a plan B in a very expeditious way. And so this is pretty extraordinary, Laura. The 38 people we have on this call is pretty good. Are there any final questions or thoughts? Seeing no, hearing no objections. Yeah, Heather.
Sorry, I'll take advantage if nobody else is going to.
Sure.
Just a total hypothetical question, completely. Like, what are the candidates? Can they describe what an ideal Putney looks like for them?
Okay, that seems like a great way. Like, in a short period of time, can you say, ideally, what's your vision of Putney? Who wants to take this one first? They're musing right now, Heather. That was a tough one.
I guess I can. My ideal Putney is, I guess the biggest thing is that, and I think we already do this, that everybody get along no matter what economic group we're in, or social group for that matter, but also just, keeping it small is what I really, why I've stayed in Putney for so long, is the ability to, you break down on the side of the road and Nate drives by, and Nate doesn't drive by me. He actually stops and says, "Are you okay?" Like that to me, so long as that continues, I think that's the ideal Putney, is the being able to communicate and understand what everybody else thinks and why. And then, making a decision, I think, is one of the biggest things that a select board person has to do, is listen to all the sides. It might not be what you agree with, but what happened our last, political election, where nobody actually it was just nothing but bad mouthing, and I feel like Putney isn't that. Putney has the ability to sit down with somebody and explain it, so long as everybody's rational and not screaming and yelling. That's the most idealistic Putney. I mean, I think we need some more businesses and more places, but those can be solved. We're all trying to solve that by being on these committees. So I feel like, so long as we continue to communicate and continue to, just explain to people, I personally explain to people all the time, like what's happening in Putney. I try to be as informed, as possible with the housing and with, taxes, because taxes don't ever go down really. Like what's going to happen, people come to me and ask me that. And I think it's really important that we all have the information, or if not, we have the ability or the resources to find that information. So that I guess that's my answer to that question.
Great. Thank you, Bryce. Nate, what is your vision of an ideal Putney?
It's such a great, hard question to answer. I totally agree with what Bryce is saying. I think that we need to be interconnected. We need to, get along and be able to have a conversation with each other. I do like the small town vibe that we have, but I do think that a little bit of growth is necessary, such as the businesses. Bryce brought that up as well. I feel like we are very limited on that. We used to have a pizza place. As soon as the Putney Pizza place left, a year or two later, we had a different pizza place that didn't last that long. But we need, we need those businesses. Mockingbird just opened up. It's a pub by the college that needs to survive, in my opinion. But we also need to create a place where you aren't going to age out of the community. Like I said earlier, you turn 18, you have no place to live. Or, a place for elderly to live. We have that, which is good, but just making sure that people can stay here and that they can grow their families here is the idea of Putney for me.
Nice. And I just got a question from Ruby McAdoo, who was joining late. She put it in chat, but nobody has asked this question. And so I'm going to put this to both of our candidates. How would each candidate handle communicating with town residents who are not happy with decisions of the select board? How would they react and interact if a resident loses their cool? So we're talking about a tense interaction. And so Nate, maybe can I give you this one first? Like if somebody was really angry and not being very polite and not modeling exactly the beautiful behavior that you both have modeled here this evening, how would you react?
I mean, start with listening. Just make sure that they feel heard. I would not try to respond negatively towards what they're upset about, and if it's a topic that I know enough about to try to educate them, then I would start there. If they don't seem receptive, after a good amount of time of trying to hear them out, trying to explain at least what I understand about the information, I would politely try to end the conversation.
Great. Thanks for that specificity. Bryce, how would you deal with such a situation?
I kind of agree with Nate. I mean, I guess when people are upset, it's the best thing to do is listen and try not to necessarily change their mind. But what I've run into this a bit, but not yelling and screaming per se. But it actually came down to the fact that the one particular person that I have in mind was never going to the meetings, and so again, the rumor mill was spreading that X, Y, and Z was happening, when if they had come to the meetings with me, would have realized that that's not what the town was doing, or what happened. So I think it's really important, which is why I've been this whole year been trying to think of ways that we could, inform people, like, do we need to have somebody on the town green that doesn't exist, saying, hear ye, this is what's happening in Putney because you guys aren't listening, or, can we do a newsletter? Can we do, like, what's the way to make, I guess everybody just realize what's happening, or, because I mean, I bet you a lot of people don't go and read the minutes from the select board. A lot of, I mean, how many people go through every line of the select board minutes and read what's really happening, like there has to be a way to consolidate that.
Mhm.
And I know it's hard in Putney to get volunteers because people are so busy in this day and age, which is why a lot of the boards don't have enough members. So I don't know what the solution is. If anybody has any ideas, let us know, because I certainly would be, I'm not the best writer, but I certainly would be into helping with a newsletter or something that we could maybe mail out, and maybe everybody gets taxed an extra $5 or $10 a year to be able to mail a newsletter that you could physically read while you're eating dinner or with the family. Because a lot of people get home at 5, 6 o'clock and they're not going to turn around and come to a select board meeting,
Mhm.
or, the planning board is at 7, like, I've made some sacrifices not putting kids to bed because I've gone to planning board meetings. So, I think it's really important that, somehow or another, even though we're doing what the state tells us we have to do in terms of recording, we need to go a little bit further and find a way, to inform everybody, so there isn't a rumor mill,
Mhm.
and so people wouldn't get upset as much, I guess.
Great, great. Thank you very much. Just a couple comments on chat. One is Jamie's needing to send off, but sends thanks to all of us for doing this, so she can put her little ones to bed. And Bert Tepfer is saying to improve the town website to make it more digestible and easier to use would help people know what is going on. So I don't see any more questions. I'm thinking this is a good moment to start to wrap this up. To give a big thank you to our candidates for coming out tonight, for both of you running, and for modeling extremely wonderful democratic behavior. And to everybody else who showed up for this call. And I know the recording will be available, so you can let people know that this will be available. I think BCTV is hoping to have this up by tomorrow. So I know it's soon. Town meeting is Tuesday. And that doesn't give you a lot of time to make up your mind. And we've been given a difficult decision this evening with 2 very strong candidates. So Laura, do you have any concluding remarks? I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, please vote. I believe that you can still vote early tomorrow at town hall, but I would call town hall first to check. And then town meeting starts at 10 a.m. on Tuesday at the school, and you never know when it's going to end, but voting ends at 7 p.m. You do not have to go to town meeting to vote. And I also want to thank the Windham County NAACP who loaned us their Zoom license for this event. So very appreciative of them for loaning us their Zoom license. And that's all. Thank you all for showing up.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.